Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the impacts of permissive parenting as a parenting style. So, if you haven't watched the earlier parts of this series, we're doing a series on the major different parenting styles and some of the outputs that will happen. You'll see them sort of relate to different attachment styles to a certain degree, especially the uninvolved parent and how big of a relationship that will have on, for example, a dismissive avoidant. And you'll see a lot of really strong parallels there. But what I want you to do if you're interested in some of this stuff is check out this series and check out what each of your parents were, because each of them will play a role. Obviously, the parent you spend more time around, you have a closer relationship to, that will be the parent who's sort of more in the primary caregiver role, and their parenting style will have a greater impact on your subconscious mind because there's more repetition and more emotional impact. But as well, sometimes when we have two parents of different styles, if one has a really strong personality and has really strong style, so for example, a permissive parent with an authoritarian parent, the permissive will have obviously a lesser impact to a certain degree in some ways, because the emotional intensity that comes out of the permissive parent is sort of blunted by the authoritarian parent. So if you're interested in this stuff, listen to the different videos, check out what's here. We have a course you can check out for free if you want to do a really deep dive into this and how to do deep reparenting work, subconscious reprogramming on the parenting imprints that were left. It will have a huge relationship to healing your attachment style in a faster period of time as well. But I'm going to go through in this video and talk about permissive parenting as a style. I'm going to talk about some of the characteristics, and then I'm going to talk about a little some of the different outputs. So the major types of outputs that happen are the different unmet needs we have because of a parenting style, the different beliefs we acquire because of what's modeled to us, what we hear repetitively, what our firsthand experiences are, the different ways we get programmed by this parenting style, essentially, and the wounds and the beliefs we adopt as a result. And then lastly, some of the behavioral patterns we may have as sort of an offshoot of this parenting style, because the way we are parented has an impact on the different behaviors we create long-term for ourselves. We adopt essentially as a result of the way we're conditioned. So if this is interesting to you, get ready. I'm going to share a lot of information here, and maybe you'll see some of the different patterns within you in this video. So the permissive parent is the indulgent parent, okay? It's sort of the parent with a high amount of responsiveness, but low demands. And the parent who's permissive tends to be quite responsive to the child's needs, but may also end up using things like food or toys or candy to bribe the child, and may sometimes treat the child like a friend rather than a child, and maintaining that sort of strong role as the parent. Now, the interesting thing about the permissive parent is that oftentimes a permissive parent is permissive because of a few key features. Number one, it can be that they're wanting to win over the child's love. And sometimes this is because the permissive parent themselves carries some form of an abandonment wound, or has a fear of an emotional dislocation from the child, and feeling like, oh my gosh, there's an abandonment or a disconnection or anything of that sort. Sometimes it's because the permissive parent is just purely conflict avoidant. Sometimes it's because they're overwhelmed, or sometimes it's because the permissive parent themselves has codependent or enmeshed patterns, where you see a lot of permissive parents where it'll sort of be like, oh my gosh, my child's in pain, and that makes me feel pain. And so as a subconscious strategy to get rid of my own pain, I just give my child food or candy when they're upset to soothe them, because I don't want to feel this uncomfortable emotion within me. And this obviously isn't a conscious thing that's taking place for the parent, but it's something to be aware of and to notice. Now, what are some of the impacts of this? We may think that originally it sounds very nice because there's a high responsiveness sort of ratio as the permissive parent, but actually there can be some really challenging behavioral outputs when there is a permissive parent. And one of them is sometimes it teaches a child, it basically trains your child, it conditions your child to have a certain degree of entitlement, right? Because the child grows up getting programmed thinking, when I cry or fuss or complain, my needs get met almost immediately. And so sometimes this will be a strategy in this child's adult life too, right? Like whenever I feel upset, I just have an adult temper tantrum and I get mad, or I get really upset or moody or whatever it might be. And sometimes that's a subconscious strategy to get needs met because you've actually been programmed that way. So we can have entitlement, we can have moodiness, we can have sort of adult temper tantrums as a strategy to get needs met. And these are some of the behaviors that are likely to be adopted if there was a really strong parent role that was quite permissive. Sometimes we'll see really high expectations of others in relationships. It's really important to be aware of, because sometimes it's like, if you always get your needs met when you request anything as a kid, you grow up in relationships to think like, my needs should be met. Because we tend to replace our relationship to our parents with our primary or our relationship with our primary caregiver, with our attachment figure in adult lives, is a romantic relationship. And so because we sort of replace our caregiver relationship with our adult romantic relationships, sometimes that will translate to like really strong really strong expectations in your adult relationships as an adult. Sometimes we'll also see a lot of impatience that can come out of this, a lot of irresponsibility and like shirking or avoiding accountability. Sometimes we'll even see like moments of grandiosity that can take place, sort of thinking that you are worthy and deserving of everything, all the things. Sometimes poor boundaries, because sometimes that permissive parent is enmeshed themselves, and so they teach enmeshment as a byproduct. That's how you learn to relate to other people. And so that can mean poor boundaries in relationship to myself to please others, if I'm taking on other people's feelings and I'm enmeshed with them. But it can also be poor boundaries and poor recognition of somebody else's boundaries, and sometimes being invasive or sometimes overstepping without consciously realizing, because there's never really been a line in the sand taught as it relates to boundaries. Sometimes we'll see difficulty seeing the other person's perspective in a situation, and sometimes things like impulsivity or a victimhood mentality. Now, I want to be clear about this. There is a difference between being victimized by something and having a victimhood mentality. A lot of people are victimized, and some people more than others, in different communities and different, with different backgrounds and upbringing. But what's really important is that, like, when we are victimized by an experience, when we have a trauma, it's already traumatic enough because it was a trauma that you went through it once. And when we use that and we repeat that story in the relationship to ourselves, and we keep, like, let's say, for example, that there was a broken trust in childhood. Okay, let's say you saw one parent cheat on the other parent. That's already challenging enough as a child. If you then bring that into your entire life and think that people are always going to cheat on you, always betray you, and you're always like hyper vigilant about this, not only does your subconscious mind have a comfort zone where you're actually going to be more attracted to people who may enact that behavior, because your subconscious mind is trying to find what's comfortable and what's familiar, but also there's often this dynamic that takes place where it's like you can actually push people away by reprojecting that all the time. And who wants to live in fear of that every single day, day in and day out? You are already traumatized once. It's horrible to have to go through that over and over and over and over again. So it's up to you as a person to be able to come out of that and do the reprogramming work to drop any core wounds that were left by any role as a parent. And so with the permissive parent, some of those core wounds will be things like, I am betrayed. There can be a lot of feelings of betrayal. When we have high expectations of people, we're going to feel betrayed when those things are let down. Sometimes I am trapped, helpless, or powerless because of that enmeshment and codependency dynamic in different life situations. Sometimes because there's so much closeness in that enmeshed dynamic too, we can hyper fear abandonment or being alone and not really have that ability to self-soothe. So some of those dynamics can be the output. So you'll see those core wounds, you'll see some of these behavioral patterns, and there are a lot of unmet needs, most so related to accountability, learning, growth, boundaries, like healthy boundaries, being able to negotiate needs, and also take others into consideration and teach empathy of other people's perspectives. Sometimes permissive children or children of permissive parents can become very empathetic because of the enmeshment components, but when they're triggered, that ability to empathize can really shut down. So these are some of the main patterns of behavior that you'll see. Now, what you can do with this is we sort of broke that into 3 categories. You may have seen there's a dynamic of behavioral patterns, a dynamic of core wounds, and a dynamic of different components of how we have unmet needs in our lives as a result of the imprints we were left with this style. So what you can do is notice what sticks out to you if you had a really permissive parent. Is there any of that? And then do some reprogramming work to meet your unmet needs, to do belief reprogramming on those core wounds, or to do behavioral reprogramming on behaviors. You can find this, if you want to check this out for free for 7 days, in our reparenting course, a lot of like in-depth reprogramming tools for those components, as well as our emotional mastery and belief reprogramming course. There's a whole area that targets like the belief patterns, a little bit of the relationship to our needs is in there as well. And then of course the reparenting has the deep reprogramming exercises specifically for these things. So you can click the link below if you want to join in. You can go into your dashboard, type in reparenting in your search box in the dashboard, and you'll see this course come up, and you'll have a workbook, all those worksheets, all that exciting stuff if you want to check it out further. So I hope this made a lot of sense. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video.